Okay, so your text box is up on my other screen. So if you have a question, because it seems like so far you guys are not going to chat with me, and that's fine. But it will take me a minute to get it, because for some reason it doesn't give me a notification when you type in a text. So if you have a pressing question, just make a noise and then I'll read over. But so one step, this is just your very basics. Some things in case, these are going to seem really ridiculous because you've been doing one step forever. But your big brick wall is a big important thing that I teach a lot of people who kind of struggle a little bit. And again, these are really basic equations and they're going to get harder, but these skills are going to be beneficial to the big picture. Also, box in the variable that you need to get by itself, because a lot of students have a hard time at the beginning just getting started, like figuring out where to start. And your idea is always to get that variable by itself. So if it's in a box, you know who's over there with it. And this is plus 1. So we're going to take the inverse of addition and we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. And so then that's going to give me t equals, sorry, I'm a color nerd and I need my pens. There they are. So t equals 6 for that one. So pretty basic, just using the inverse of addition. But again, your practice, if you're writing them down, is just to get your organization on your paper. Because a lot of mistakes I've found too while watching students do them is just not being neat and organized in their notes. And then you mess up. You lose a negative or you lose a positive or you rush through it. So we know we need x by itself. So we have a minus 10. The inverse of subtraction is going to be addition. So we're going to add 10 to both sides. Because whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. And that's going to leave me with 4 equals x. All right. So we're going to do it one more time. This is pretty basic. But this time it is a plus negative 9, but we need this 9 to become the opposite. So since it's a negative 9, we're going to add 9 because that's how we're going to get 0 over here. So we're going to add 9. And so t is going to equal to 2. Because negative 7 plus 9 means I owed you $7, but I handed you 9. So instead of you being in the whole $7, you now have a positive $2 in your pocket that you didn't have before. I like to talk about everything as far as money or food, because those are things we care about. Numbers and algebra equations, maybe not so much. So then we have x plus a negative 6, but we need this negative 6 to become a 0. So the opposite of negative 6 is a positive 6. And we need to do it to both sides. So x, grab the bad pen, sorry, equals 14. Because positive 8, positive 6 is that 14. So that's your super basic. And the delta math, that was add and subtract. Hopefully you didn't have too many issues there. If anybody has a question, like I said, just hit me up in the conversation box on the right. So then the one-step multiplication in delta, this is again knowing that the inverse of multiplication is division. So the inverse operation, again, I'm still a big fan of making sure I know where my variable is and what I'm trying to get by itself. So that negative 12 is attached to a. Something I've realized a lot in teaching math 1 is, and I'm not sure where it gets passed up in your previous math classes, but this just becomes a thing to you. This is negative 12 times a. So literally this is the same thing as that, or if you, back in the old days where you really used your x for multiplication. So negative 12 times a. So the opposite of multiplication is division. Sorry about tripped up on my words. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 12. Now, negative 18 over negative 12 is going to give me a decimal. I don't want us to necessarily do decimals. I want us at this point to practice simplifying fractions, so reducing. If you have a calculator, you can type that in, negative 18 divided by negative 12, hit enter, and then hit math, and then hit frac. And math is on the left-hand side of your calculator if you have a TI-84 or 83. So it would be right here. So if you wanted to, it would be negative 18 divided by negative 12. Get a decimal at the moment, then hit math, and then that fraction, if you hit enter, and then enter again, depending on which one you have is how many times you'll have to enter. But that means it's 3 over 2 is a reduced fraction. If you don't want to use your calculator, because most of the ones I'm going to give you are pretty easy, you find a common factor. So 6 goes into 18 3 times, so negative 3. 6 goes into negative 12, 2, it's negative. But a negative and a negative make that a positive. Because a negative divided by a negative or a negative times a negative will always give you a positive outcome. So then 9b equals 4. Again, we're trying to get that b by itself. So we're going to divide both sides by 9 because that's what's attached to that b. So again, you're looking for your variable and what's over there with it to what to get rid of. And so that's going to give me b equals 4 over 9. Well, 4 is divisible by 2, 4, and 1. None of which is really any good to 9 except for 1. So my assumption is that this guy is as simplified as possible. But if we 4 divided by 9, get a fraction, hit math, frac again, it is 4 divided by 9. So that's your answer, unless it's best as it's just ugly. It's just going to be a thing. And the reason you probably wouldn't want to use this one as a decimal again, just in conversation for future math classes, that repeating 4, that becomes kind of emotional to what teacher, what program, how many 4s you write, where you put the line over the top. It's different for whoever wrote the worksheet. And so especially like in an online formatting of a class, I would stick to your fractional choices because a fraction is a fraction. And every Delta Math, IXL, which hopefully we'll get one day soon, all the programs we use will definitely take a fraction, but the decimal, you will have to read really closely not to mess that up. So if you can practice using the fraction as much as most of us don't like fractions, you're going to have a better chance of getting answers right up front. So then our next one, 15 is attached to the x, so this is where our variable is. So we're going to divide both sides by 15. So x equals negative 2 over 15. Be careful because that's one of the places that somebody will dump that negative just out of carelessness, just not paying attention, not because you don't see it necessarily until you're midway through. You're just excited because you're done and you jump. So be very, very careful to pay attention to your positives and negatives. It's a common mistake and a silly reason to miss an equation because you didn't miss it because of not being able to do the math. You did it because of careless errors. And careless errors are frustrating. So negative 2 over 15. So 2 obviously is only divisible by 1 and 2. 15 is only divisible by 1, 3, 5, and 15. So this one also cannot be reduced. So you're done here. Figure out where our variable is. What's attached to it is 2 times w, and the inverse again of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. So x is going to equal negative 4 divided by 2. It's going to give me a negative 2. Or it can be written negative 2 over 1. But that is to be assumed as negative 2. All whole numbers have an imaginary 1 underneath them. Always. Though we don't write them that way. But all whole numbers have a negative 1 underneath them. So then that would be your final answer for that guy there. And those were our one-step multiplication level 2 from Delta Math from our assignment last week. Now, one-step equations division from Delta Math. So again, versus just the last one was multiplication, and we knew the inverse of multiplication is division. So the inverse of division is multiplication. So since this is w divided by 10, then that means we're going to multiply both sides by 10. So multiply this side by 10 and multiply this side by 10. So 10 times 1 is 10. And then these cross out. And that all depends on what teacher taught you prior to me. I don't want to unteach anything, but for those of you who like y's, so w over 10 times 10 over imaginary 1 is going to give me 10w over 10. And we're in high school, so we always reduce, and that just becomes 1, which leaves you with w. So 10 equals w. So again, this is your y right here. But many teachers have just taught that they cross each other out, or most of my students I've seen have just memorized that they cross out. All right, so u divided by negative 6, and if you like your big brick wall, if it just is easier to keep doing the same thing over and over, do it. Rather you write too much than not enough. So we have negative 6 in the bottom, so u divided by negative 6 means the inverse of division is multiplication, so we're going to multiply by negative 6. So these guys cross out, so I end up with u equals, and that's negative 6 times a negative 6. And we want to remember that a negative times a negative gives us a positive, and 6 times 6 is 36. So negative 6 times a negative 6 gives us a positive 36. These are usually my favorite because they're pretty they don't get very messy, especially when there's a 1 on the top with your u or your x or your w. There's not much that you can really do wrong as long as you just keep it, again, neat and keep up with what you're doing. All right. So a couple more of these just in case. So it's x divided by negative 7. So we're going to multiply by negative 7, multiply by negative 7. Again, pay really close attention to your negatives. Don't leave them out. Don't lose them. So negative times a negative, again, gives me 7 times 7 is 49. And these guys crossed out, so that just left me with x. So 49 is x, or x equals 49. And it does not matter if you're x on the right or the left, depending on the equation. Just make sure if you start switching it, again, that you don't make a careless error and forget a negative or add a negative or do something wild and crazy. So again, this guy, we have a negative 5 at the bottom, so we're going to multiply by a negative 5 on both sides. These guys cross out. So t equals 3 times a negative 5. So that's a positive and a negative, which means we're going to have a negative outcome. So negative 15 is going to be my answer for that one. So t equals negative 15. Last but not least, we have 7 on the bottom. It's a positive 7, so we're going to multiply both by 7. b equals, these guys go away. It's going to give me 35, because 5 times 7, they're both positive. We're going to get a positive answer out. So that is, I think we have one more section from our Delta assignment, because I have them printed, so we might as well do them for Math 1 anyway. So, don't panic. This is literally the same thing as what you just did, the combination of the two. So you can attack these a couple of different ways. I'm going to do the 2 on the left first, because they're both positive, so that we'll discuss the negative part later. But depending on how your brain works, if the last couple have been super easy, then I would suggest sticking to that. And the idea is that this 2 needs to come off the bottom. So we'll multiply both sides by 2 because it's in the denominator, and we need to get it out of the denominator. Those are going to cross out. So that leaves me with 3s equals 4. And then now it looks like the section before the last one, and we're going to divide by 3. So s equals, and 4 over 3 can't really be reduced. It is improper because 4 is greater than 3. So you could have someone write 1 and 1/3, and I would take that fine. But remember, I don't really want you to do decimals unless the instructions tell you to. But as a whole, I would rather you get more comfortable with fractions instead of letting those boogers freak us out, because a lot of people get a little punchy when they see fractions. Now, the other way is opposite reciprocal. Not opposite, the reciprocal. So that's doing the multiplication and the division all at one time. So we're going to multiply by flipping this fraction. So 5 over 4, and then we're going to multiply this one by 5 over 4, and we remember that 10 is over an imaginary 1. So 5 times 4 is 20, 5 times 4 is 20, and 20 over 20 gives me 1, and we have r. So those go away, and we have r equals 10 times 5 is 50, and 1 times 4 is 4. 50 divided by 4 is again another improper fraction, but I don't think it can be reduced. So we can do 50 divided by 4 in our calculator. So I'm going to try to get us back in our window here. 12.5. So 12 and 1/2 as a fraction, or 12.5, depending on the program you're entering your answer into. If we hit Math Frac, gives me 25 over 2, and that's going to be your most simplified version of that fraction. So 25 over 2 would be the most simplified, or you could have 12 and 1/2 as your answer. But 50 over 4 is not your best answer, though it is a answer. At this point, we want to make sure we always reduce, and we're trying to really play with fractions at this point because we haven't gotten anything hard yet. So that would just be like if I'd multiplied by 5, I would have gotten 50 on top, and then I would divide it by 4, so we just jump. So again, multiplying by the reciprocal is just doing the division step and the multiplication step at one time. So to this guy, we have a negative here, so we want to make sure that we don't forget that negative there. So I'm going to do multiply by the guy on the bottom. These guys are going to go away. So that means I'm going to have a negative 1t equals, and that's a negative 12, so negative 24. Divide by negative 1, and t equals 24. If I had done it by the reciprocal, then I would have done negative 2 over 1 times 1 over 2t equals negative 12 times a negative 2 over 1. That's 1. that one's negative 2, sorry. So these guys go away, so that's going to be positive 2 over 2t, which is 1t, equals negative 12 times negative 2 is 24 over 1. But just so you can see the comparison side by side, it's whichever one makes sense in your brain. They are both accurate. And realistically, this is this. It's just happening more broke down. So more individual steps here. One more, so I have a negative 2/3. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So then these go away. X equals negative 3 times 12. It's going to be a negative 36 over 2. And 36 divided by 2, it's going to give you a negative 18. If we'd done it the longer way, or more broken down way, I shouldn't say it's necessarily longer, this is our problem, then we'd multiply both sides by 3. Which gives me 36 equals negative 2x divided by negative 2. Negative 18 equals x. So it's fairly fast, but that was everything that was in your Delta math assignment for this so far, for that first day. Does anybody have any questions or anything I can make more clear? If you could hit me with a no in the chat box if you don't have one, just so I know.